Hey there, Dengar Stu here. Today's video is about Adrian's work on rebuilding the blower, governor and fuel pump from the Detroit Diesel, and is proudly sponsored by MarineEngine.com. This footage is obviously from before we started the Detroit Diesel up for the first time, and as well as doing a great job on repairing all these bits, Adrian also kindly filmed it for us so we could see what he was doing. Alright, let's get straight into it and start with him showing us the tools he needed to do the job properly.
Okay, so this is Adrian from 892 Trucking, putting the 471 Dengar blower together for them. These are just some of the blower tools. So these four here are for inserting the blower rotors through the seals, so as you don't damage the seal when you're assembling them. This here is for installing, this one here, for installing the rear bearing into the blower end plate once the blower rotors are into the housings. This is the tool for putting the wear sleeves for the seals onto the blower rotor shafts. This is the tool for inserting the seals into the end plates of the housing, so that we have them, as you can see, recessed into the end plates. Previously, before, when I stripped the blower, these seals were running flush on the end plates and hence not sealing correctly on the sleeves. This is the front bearings installer for the front bearings in the blower once it's all assembled. These are just some old tools from back when I was an apprentice and that I'd made to put things together, and couldn't afford the genuine item. They're made out of, this one's made out of an old, this is for the blower sleeves, this for putting the seal sleeves on. This is made out of an old V653 Detroit blower drive hub. So yeah, made lots of tools out of different things over the years when I couldn't afford them. But yeah, these are some of the things. So now we're just going to prepare the rest of the end plate and get some sealant on there and get some rotors in and show you what's happening. Okay, so this is one of the end plates that I've stripped out of the Dengar 471 blower. It's damaged. It's been damaged when they've knocked the bearings into the end of the housing. Obviously they've had some trouble, and I think, as Stuart had mentioned before, it was cracked. As you can see, there's the crack there. It actually runs across through the bolt hole and down the outside of the casting. Like, it could possibly be repaired, would be a bit of time consuming, and get distortion in the end plate, machining it and trying to get it all back. Time-wise, we've just opted with the option of getting another good end plate, which we have done. Also, this is a reason why they have tools for inserting the blower rotors. You can cut the seals, as they have done when they've inserted the rotors here, and damage them. Now, this can lead to oil running into the blower, but also these oil drain holes, which you can see here, wherever my finger's gone, drain back. These were all contaminated and full of silastic and partially blocked. So, hence, which means the rotor, which sits this way on the engine, would have filled with oil, not draining properly, and oil then fills the blower, and we could have had a possible runaway and an engine failure. Not something you really want. They're a lot of fun to try and stop when they take off. Anyway, start assembling these. We put the rotors in. I normally use 2 blocks. These are my blower building blocks, as I call them, to sit the end plates on, so that when the shafts drop through, there's plenty of room there. They're not going to hit the bench. And it also says that in the book you should have them sitting up on something so you don't hit the bench. But anyway, the book isn't always. This can be a bit hard to follow, especially if you've not done it before. It's not something for the faint-hearted at the end of the day. Be prepared to be questioning what you're doing all the time. So I'm now going to spin these up in the lathe, just polish these end of these shafts up where the seal sleeves sit. The 2 blower rotors, and give them a good clean up as well. I have one actually already set up over here in the lathe ready to clean up. I'm going to just give him a clean up and then we'll slip them in the housing. Okay, so clean the blower rotors up. They're a bit stained, happens just over years of age and whatever. Sometimes the marine one's a little bit more stained than on a marine based engine, just from the corrosion in the air, the salt in the air and that. Alright, so this is our new wear sleeve for the seals. The old ones were damaged and not replaced, so they would have leaked eventually. Pretty straightforward. Sleeve onto the shaft. Actually, put oil on the shaft first. Not used to this videoing thing, but anyway, we'll give it a go. A bit of oil just around there to make sure it slides on nicely, and some inside the sleeve. Okay, so just gently sit him into position. Now this is the tool I showed you before for the sleeves. The sleeve actually sits inside like so. There's a measured depth. As you can see, it can't go in any further. The tool will bottom out on the side of the rotors, giving you the correct depth. If it's not correct, they leak, oil passes into the engine, all sorts of other lovely things can eventuate at the end of the day. So, you know, like I said before, it's not something you go and tackle unless you need pretty much the right tools, or be able to make them and have all the dimensions. So here we go. I'll just knock this on and I'll be back in a minute. I'll knock these on and everything will be perfect. Alright, so this is the blower case. We are now just going to check, make sure it's nice and square, make sure there's no highs and lows, as you can see, like using the steel ruler, different points across the blower case, no light under it. And the ends, this has got to be done on both ends, and the mating face to the block. Very important. Because if there's any great distortion, it will leak, or when you do the blower up, it won't turn. So it's pretty important. Especially on a blower this big, or this size, they don't sort of distort, they don't take much distortion to lock up, because your clearances are quite minimal. So that's pretty good. I'd be happy to put that together. We'll just check the last end. So pretty happy with that. I'd be happily to use that. So also there's lots of scoring, as you can see inside the blower. This happens just more so in a marine application. It does happen in an automotive application as well, but because most marine applications don't run an air cleaner, so little bits of grit that fly around in the engine room do go through the blower, and that's hence these scoring. So we just clean the blower up with some emery cloth and make sure there's no raised areas where these grooves are. Make sure there's nothing protruding. So I've already cleaned this up prior. It's ready to go. There's no raised edges. I've run a steel ruler around there to check that again, so it doesn't drag on the rotors and we don't end up with a aluminium in the pistons, and then the ring seizing to the pistons full of aluminium, and then seizing in the ball. So it's all pretty critical. It's not something to be taken light-hearted. Okay, so I've applied some sealant here to the end of the blower case, which I'm now going to put onto the end plate, or put the end plate onto the blower case. Let's use a Loctite 515. It's a flange sealant. There'll be 2 fillet head screws which go in there to retain this while I assemble the rest of the blower. As you see, I've left a small gap around the edge from where I've applied the sealant, so it's got room to move and then should not protrude into the blower case inside where the rotors are. Very critical that they don't end up with any goo in there. Otherwise it drags around on the rotors and creates hot spots and then picks up aluminium. Ready to put the blower rotors in. I've put a sealing sleeve on the end, just slips on, slips off. Pretty simple. They are marked, the rotors, lower and upper. So we're going to put the lower rotor in first. It's got an L stamped on it, and the upper marked with a U for upper. So don't mix them up. It is critical because this end has no thread in it. And this end does have a thread, which goes to your fuel pump drive, your water pump drive, and that's a bit critical. We need that water pump to be spinning, so if you don't put that in there, you won't be able to put your water pump drive on and hold it in place. So it's pretty critical where they go. Alright, so I'm going to try and do this. I'll put that back on there, slide the rotor in gently. Just line him up there. So he'll go, he's sliding in through the seal there at the moment. Just a quick sharp push in, and there's our sleeve and the last bit of the seal that pops out with the seal. So all is good, and I can now set the serrations on the end of the gear, on the end of the shaft here. It's two serrations, it's missing two splines. This points to the top. So when we're timing up the gears, everything is timed correctly. And then we'll set up our blower clearance. All right, so pretty straightforward, but that's in, and I'll get the next one in and then plate on, and then we'll do some time the gears up and do the clearances. Goes in, all is good. Two screws are in, done up. Okay, so I've got tool here. This is number, it's on here somewhere, 6270-6. This is for knocking the bearing in. Notice it's just smaller than the bearing. Also has a hole that will lead up through the blower shaft, through the blower drive shaft. Or it's not really the blower, the rotor shaft we'll call it. There is clearance between this shoulder of the bearing and this shoulder. This is slightly higher, so that when you do knock the bearing in, you're actually not hitting on this outer edge where you could actually damage it and cause pitting marks where the rollers are and premature wear. So they're just slightly, it's only a couple of thou, but it's enough, as you can see. I can sort of hold the tool and spin it a bit and it doesn't move because it's sitting on that other shoulder. So I'll tap these in, try and do this. Only gentle tapping, no need to flog it. You'll only, so now the tool won't wander off from me, so it's a bit easier. No need to flog it. It should just tap in nicely. Not belting, just weight of the hammer basically should be enough to drive the bearing in. If it falls in loosely, then you're probably going to be looking to put some bearing mount Loctite on it, so that it is all back. You can hear it drive change note there, it's hit the bottom and it's home. Bearing mount to help secure it. Make sure if you're going to use if you have to do that, or when if the bearing falls in, it's really clean. The outside of the bearing is clean. Clean it with some thinners, brake cleaner, to make sure that there is nothing there that'll stop the Loctite from failing. But you only, at this point, if you're going to do that, a couple of small drops around the outside. That's it. Don't go smothering it. There is such thing as too much. Righto, so I'll knock the other bearing in and dig the end plates up with the little screws, the little quarter screws. So they're only a very tiny amount of tension on those, but every bolt has a tension, and that's for a reason. So I'll get those out. In the meantime, I'll knock this other bearing in, and then we'll proceed again. Righto, so I've got the other bearing in. I've dug out the little bolts. Now, upon digging these out, this is one of the other ones for the other end of the, probably not very good focus there. I'll try and get some focus here. I don't know. Anyway, you can probably see there's a silvery substance on the bolt, which is never sees. That is not cool. Never sees is full of metal particles. This ends up in the bolt thread. It will eventually wash out and goes through the oil and everything. So metal and engines and oil don't mix. So never sees is not for putting inside an engine when you're assembling it. Don't do it. That's why they have an oil can with some engine oil in it, and we put that on the threads of the bolts. So we shall do that now. I'll lube up the bolts, get them all ready to go in. You need a little bit just to get them lubricate, just so they've got a bit of lubrication. So when you tension them, you reach the correct tension. So we have these two retaining plates, which just landed on there. Beautiful. This is just line up one hole, screw the bolt in. Now these clamp the bearing in. I'll just show you, the bearing does sit slightly proud of the aluminium housing, probably by about 5 to 10 thou. As you can get a little bit closer. As you can see there, that's the ruler sitting across the bearing, and it's proud. So that little plate pulls down and locks the bearing into the housing as well. So another reason why you don't need to smother it in Loctite. Just need a couple of little drops just to help, that's all. Alright, so I'll tension these up to 15 foot-pound, and then I shall insert the bearings in the front of the blower, which are a slightly different bearing. They can actually move, as you can see. So that's to allow for when we align and adjust the shimming on the gears at the back to get the clearances right. So if we had two fixed bearings, we'd never be able to shim it and adjust the clearance. Also allows for heat and expansion in the blower. When it's running, blower produces a lot of heat. So yeah, these are pretty good bearings. They don't give a lot of trouble. The only time they sort of seem to give trouble is when they've had water and contamination in them. These were fitted new when the blower was last rebuilt. They're still okay, they're still good. There's nothing wrong, the blower hasn't run, so we're not going to waste any more of Stuart's money than we have to. He's probably feeling a bit sorry and sore now, but that's alright. We'll get him sorted. So I'll screw these down, clamp it up, and I'll show you the other end as we're putting ours in. And then we'll start aligning the gears and getting some clearances. Righto, so I was a bit presumptuous, I got carried away and I've knocked the bearings in, but that's cool. So I have, as we said, the plates. As you can see, these bearings actually sit a bit different in the housing. They sit down lower because of the shape of the bearing. There's our water pump drive shaft, which I was talking about earlier. Water pump's on the bottom, that's where we've got to be. So this housing here helps sort of direct and keep the oil from flying around out to a hard against the gaskets at the bottom, and just sort of keeps it pocketed up to and directing it back up around the blower. So yeah, this is our drain hole, which last time was near blocked. So, and there's another one at the opposite end, just down here. They were blocked, nearly blocked, so with our failed damaged seal, we could have had a monumental failure of the engine. So I'll put these end plates on, pretty straightforward. Dirty fingerprints there. So 15 foot-pounds is the same as the back. Then I'll slip our fuel pump drive in, and we'll turn him round, and then we'll start setting up some clearances on the rotors. Pretty critical. CC is your most critical clearance. I'll get the book out when we get to that point and just give you a bit of just show you how it's. So this is tension wrench. It's set at 15 foot-pound. The light's now giving me some there. So we'll just nip these up. It's a bit fancy, this one. beeps and vibrates when it gets to the tension. I'll just nip them down a bit first, just so you can see that they're not very tight at all. You find lots of these have been stripped and damaged from people just not knowing and heavy-handed, thinking that 15 foot-pounds is swinging off with a 6-foot bar. Like, I'm barely pulling on this right now. We're already at, there's 5. You can see the tension, hopefully you can see the tension wrench changing. I'm not very good at this videoing thing. So that's at 15 foot-pound. So there you go. It's a bit awkward to do, trying to hold the blower and tension it, but just so you've at least seen one, so you know that I am tensioning them and I'm not just spreading a few rumours. Yes, it's pretty important. Every bolt is tension. There's a tension for it for a reason. Aluminium, very soft. If aluminium was any good, they'd have made steel out of it. Famous sayings of a friend of mine. But be good with it and it'll be good to you. So yeah, I suppose the oil is drains in from the camshaft pocket on an inline 71, drains into this cavity here, also this cavity here for the rear. As you can see, there's a hole there for it. There it is. A hole there for the oil to run through, runs in, dribbles down, it runs around this plate to help throw it around. This is your water pump drive on an inline 71. The little dimples on the back of the water pump. I'll grab the water pump in a second and show you. And these are here to catch any oil that, these two arms, any oil, and toss it around to lubricate the back water pump bearing, the blower bearings, toss it all about. The holes here, you can see, will also catch oil for it to run into the bearings as well. So this is our engine side, obviously. Yes, so the oil will run in, pocket up, and then dribble back out through the bearing here, and then so forth. So it's not pressure fed, it's all gravity fed. So it relies on that, make sure you've got the oil level right on the engine so that it can throw the right amount of oil around and it can all run back. So things are critical. Oil is very cheap, and it's a lot cheaper than going through this process of rebuilding an engine. Engines wear out because of time and use, but they also wear out prematurely because of lack of lubrication, poor oil, lack of servicing, all sorts of things. I've seen lots of things over the years. I've been doing these two-strokes since I was 15, so seen lots of different things, and seen people do some horrible things to engines. Yeah. Anyway, that's just a little bit more. Maybe later on I'll take you for a walk around the yard, show you a few of mine. 4 trucks and a loader. All are all Detroit powered. So yeah. Anyway, I shall continue on. 1974 Road Commander, which has a Detroit in it. Bought the truck from Victoria. It's a bit of a mess at the moment. Have water in the sump. The person we bought it off thought it had failed, the engine had failed, but we found, and very common with a 71 V series, that the water pump had failed. So it's a bit of a mess under here, got a few little leaks, but it's time to come. So today he's just putting on an oil filter adapter, so he doesn't have to use a cartridge filter. So we're just going to check the tension on it for him and make sure that it's all assembled correct. Otherwise, if it's not assembled correct, oil won't be filtered, and then we'll just have dirty oil running through the bearings. Not a cool thing. Okay, so now I'm going to pull the second-hand blower gears off for Stuart, because the other ones were pretty badly pitted just from the water and the condensation that had obviously been in the engine all those years. So it didn't end up and rot them. They're a bit rotten, so we don't want any to break down, any more metal fatigue or particles to break down and go into the engine. They're pretty badly pitted. Got one of them just here in front of me, trying to probably get a good see how pitted they are. And by the time that starts to run and spin at 1900 revs, that'll be rubbing together and just taking all those little sharp edges off, and a whole lot of metal goes through the engine. So not cool. We contaminate the oil cooler, the oil filter, and it all just goes on from there. So now I'm going to pull these gears off. This is a proper set of Kentmore Detroit blower gear removing tools. There's other ways to get them off, which are very primitive and not. You can damage things. So they're pretty tight. I haven't sort of given it a good heaving yet. I'm just about to try and wind them off. Once they're off, I'll get them out, clean them up, have a look, make sure they are okay. And then we can shim the gears. This gear's to suit the other blower here, which is all ready to take the gears. Make sure you take the gears off evenly. So if you do half a turn on one, half a turn on the next puller, that way then they come off nice and even. Otherwise you'll start to try and pull the gear off and you'll end up damaging the rotors. You'll drive them together and put creases in them. So yeah, anyway, it's a bit of a process. It's slow, it's tedious, but to make it right, what's time cost? Okay, so this is the blower drive. You only have one of these, blower drive hub. This one, here, it's a bit hard to see, but the splines are pretty good. It's in pretty good nick. This is off the blower that Stuart just acquired. This is the one off the old blower. If you have a good look, you can barely see the points of the splines, quite worn, and actually they do strip. More, not as much in a marine application, but more in automotive, but they will strip. When you're back on and off the throttle, this rocks backwards and forwards and wears the splines. So these are the blower shims. Blower shims for the gears. So this was the ones that were on the upper blower drive shaft, which is this one, as it says top there. So I'll put them ones back on there, and this one's here are the ones off the lower side. So we'll put them back on there and we'll put the gears on, and we'll check our clearance. All going well, it'll be correct, but not always the case. So this is what they call the driven gear. Usually we'll shim this driven gear up to turn the helix to close and open the rotor clearance. So it moves in and out against the other gear, and this closes and opens your rotor clearances. So I'll put these on and then we'll do a measurement and see where we're at. So I've got the gears on. I've already done a quick inspection on the clearances. They're pretty good. Whoever had assembled it must have spent the time and got the shimming right for the gears and the clearance on the rotors previously. So here's the book. Just gives you a breakdown. Your most critical clearances are your CC there and your C. On the outlet side and on the inlet side. Different model blowers. We're doing a RA, RB, LA blower. It's a designation on how the engine's built, whether the blower's on the right or the left, engine viewed from the rear. So our blower is on the left, with the exhaust coming out on the right. And so there's just the clearances that we need to be checking, the C and the CC, the most critical. We also do need to check that the rotors are clear in the housing, the D's and E's as well, but the most critical are the C and the CC. The others will generally fall into place as if they are correct. You'll be pretty well spot on once you get those two correct. They're the ones you really want to chase. So at the moment, it's a bit hard to do, but I'll give it a go. So we've got 12th hour clearance we should have on the C. So I'm going to check the C now with this 12th hour feeler gauge. As you see, the feeler gauge is in. I can turn the rotor, it will flex around. So this should now just come out without too much. A little bit of drag, you'll feel some drag because it's quite a thick feeler gauge 12th hour. So it's got a bit of drag, but it comes out. If it's too tight, it won't come out. And you won't be able to turn the blower around onto it either. So pretty happy with that one there. And then we're checking the CC here now, which is 2 thou. So it's like a piece of paper, tiny, really thin, cigarette paper. So it's a bit awkward again. There we go. So that goes around there, just wind it in, and very little resistance to coming in. There's drag, but not stopping it, which is what we want. So both those clearances are fine. So the blower turns nicely, I can spin it around my fingers freely, beautifully, sounds good. That's what we want. It's pretty much ready now to tension up the gears on the end here to 90 foot-pound, tension these 2 bolts, and then lock over the lock tabs. Pretty important. Don't use Loctite on the bolts, not required. 90 foot-pound with engine oil on the bolts, and they'll never come loose, and use the lock tabs. So yeah, this is it. This gear here is pretty well, this washer on this gear is critical. This is the fuel pump drive washer, drives the fuel pump fork, which is over here in the collection of snot of bolts. Here it is. So there it is there, which again, someone's applied never sees. No need to put never sees on the blower drive fork. It just slides into these 2 slots, like so. So then this will sit on the fuel pump when we go to install it into the housing later, drop into there and drives the gear fuel pump. As you can see here, I've just been using some petrol to wash the never sees out of all these said bolts. It's actually turning to silver snot in there. You can see all the silver in it. So there's been a lot of never sees on all the bolts and parts that really shouldn't have had never sees. It's pretty critical that there is none. It's just not what you want inside the engine. So then this blower drive coupling will then be fitted to the back of the engine here now, and shortly it'll have some little spaces like such, which sit on there behind the tin plate to hold it out to clear the gear. And that will then tie up the back end, ready for the back cover to go on. Then we'll put all the bolt cover on, all the bolts around it, and then tension those to 20 foot-pound, which is the correct tension for them. They're only 5/16 UNC, and then we'll be ready to start assembling the governor. So this is the end plate from the Dango Island 471, which was blocked up with Celastic and contaminated. So now I'm here with a razor blade scraping it to clean the excess Celastic off, so as we can assemble it and put some new sealant on there. So here's part of the governor weight assembly, which was all seized, rusted and corroded when I got to it, so the engine would never have started. This is what they call the governor weight carrier. So this was all seized to the shaft. I've since freed it up the other day. It was frozen on there. There's a little bit of rust come from just dampness in the air. I need to polish back off since I've cleaned it up and got it working, but this was all badly corroded to the shaft. There is some wear on there where the governor fork has been riding on there. It's obviously been rebuilt before or been apart, it's been turned over. That little bit of wear is okay. This is probably the worst end. I would probably not use this end. I'll probably dress this end back in the lathe and just take those little pimples out before I assemble it. Also the bearings for that and the pins for the weight. So these are the weights that go inside this carrier. like so. These were all, hence because it was all frozen, these were frozen too. So these were all badly rusted. Just try to get the light in the right spot, but you can see the bearings in there. It's a bit hard to, and this one's probably the better end to see. You can see the rust in there. It's all the rollers are all nasty and rusty, so we had to press all that apart. So this is the throttle, which when I was down there and looking at the engine was seized as well. Now I've got the plunger stuck, but this was all frozen. The roller on the back here has a small amount of wear on it and some surface rust, so I'll press that out once I get the throttle shaft off. Check the bearings in here, and here they also are needle rollers, so I'll have to knock that Welsh plug out. A bit of fluffing around. These things are not a 5-minute build. There is a lot of time when it's done right. People question why you give them a bill at times, or why things, and question why things take so long, but this is why. These are the little things that make the engine perform at the end of the day, are critical. If they're not moving freely and doing what they're supposed to do, engine's not going to perform. It's very critical. This is the bearing off the end of the governor weight shaft. As you can see, it's pretty gnarly. It's all rusty. See, it runs here on the end of the shaft and there, and sits down into there with a Welsh plug in the housing, which retains that threaded plug, which holds it in situ. I'll show you the pins out of the governor weights as well while I've got them here. So as you can see, they're pretty badly rusted. You can actually see some little lines there if I get the light right, from just years of use. And that's what happens. They wear, they get roller marks in them because they only move a small amount back and forth. Probably only move half an inch if you're lucky. So that end of where the governor is, it only moves a little bit, so you end up with notches in there, which makes the governor weights notchy. Don't get a smooth acceleration transition, and eventually they'll wear and you won't get full power because the governor weights won't throw out to pull the rack into full fuel properly. So anyway, this is where I'm at now. I'll buzz this lock tabs over, tension that up, and put the cover on, and then that'll be assembled ready to go. And then we'll attend to the governor and the fuel pump. So we'll strip the little fuel pump out, little different pump. Pretty simple job, but yet again, there are tools and there's practices when if you don't do it right when you're getting it apart, you'll damage the housing, gears won't turn, metal through the fuel system. So hopefully people can see that this is why it takes time, and you know, it's not for the faint-hearted. If you're not prepared to read the book, have a go properly and follow it letter for letter, then don't attempt it. Okay, so fuel pumps slipped apart pretty easily. It's just a matter of undoing the bolts around the outside and a bit of a tap on the fuel pump drive shaft, which is inside like that. Just tap it from the bottom side and just it'll knock the cover up. Comes apart nicely without belting the sides of it and putting dents in it. Anyway, so fuel pump shaft is not the best. The gear on it is really good. Looks quite, definitely very, could reuse the gear, but the end of the shaft here, where the seal runs, is all pitted and damaged, just from moisture sitting around, rust. So we'll have to replace the shaft or the gear set. I'm pretty sure I should have another one here somewhere. This is the other gear in the pump, so it's in pretty good nick as well. A little bit of wear, which is understandable. So it runs on this side of the pump. It's a little bit tight in there. I think someone at some point has given it a bit of a razzing, but anyway, so they run, that's what it looks like with the two gears in there. And This is the cover. The cover will only go on one way. As you can see, there's a deeper hole and a shallower hole. Obviously the shallow hole over the shallow shaft and the deep hole over the longer shaft. So the pump has an inlet and outlet, obviously. Inlet side, outlet side. So this fitting would just be connected to your primary filter, the outlet on your primary fuel filter. This is then connected to your secondary filter. So it goes then from there to your secondary filter, then from the secondary filter into the engine. And there's a primary filter, which the tank runs the primary filter, then to here pumps your engine. Pump only does 60 psi. It is just a delivery pump. It's nothing more. The injector does the rest of the metering and everything else. There's a relief valve in here, which goes in this little hole on the side, which is in pretty good nick. Being a low horsepower, not a hard working engine, in constant revs, the fuel plunger won't be actuating all the time and going up and down with high revs, and usually in the marine application they last fairly well because they're constant revs yet again. So yeah, those both, the spring and the plunger and all the little pin there, are all in good nick. So we'll be able to reuse those, and I'll dig Stuart up a fuel pump shaft to sort that problem with the rust on that one. And these seals go in two different, can be put in two different directions. So that's the oil seal that stops the oil getting out. Just lift the lid off again. So there is another seal just down there. You can probably just see the edge of it shining. It's a bit hard to get a focus on it. You can sort of probably see the edge of it glistening there. So there's two seals. You can probably see a bit better that way. There's the two seals. The inner seal can go two ways. One for tank above the engine, and one for tank below the engine. So the way it's in there now, it's set up for the tank to be above the engine. So we need to make sure that that's critical. If you put it in the wrong way, you'll have fuel running back through the seal and out obviously over the port here on the side. This tube, which is there just for if it leaks fuel or leaks oil, give you a bit of a tattletale. They don't all have them. Some will just have the hole in the bottom of the pump open. This was an early thing that Detroit's did. Later on they went away from it, and obviously to save money and less things to spend money on for them. So the outer seal there, the oil seal, has to go that way. And yes, yet again, there are tools to do this job. Need a little foot drive, a foot punch. It's a little foot to one side. I'll dig that out in a minute and show you before I knock them out. And another tool to put it back in, which I have made years ago. It's out of an old fuel pump gear, so it's pretty easy to make the tool to insert them. You just need to check where you position them if you don't put them in the right position, then it will leak. Knock the old seals out. These have been replaced in recent years, so that's a late seal. It's a newer style. It's just seal. So the old ones are a bit different. This is an older style seal, but it's still new. It hasn't been used, just as an example. So they just changed a little bit in shape, that's all. Nothing else really. The material's still the same and still work well. So we found another shaft for the fuel pump, which has a couple little wear marks, which will set the seals in the fuel pump so that we're not on the old wear marks there, and all will be good. So just goes to show you. And this is the tool I use to install the seals. Yes, it looks like the fuel pump gear, but if you have a look side by side, I've machined the gears down to suit the outer diameter of the seal, so that can be pressed into the housing. Actually, it goes in the other way, onto the tool the other way, but get the idea. So I use that to push the seal in with the press, just gently into the right position, and then the outer seal. So pretty straightforward, but if you get the depth wrong, it will leak, or it won't seal, or it'll suck air and it won't start. So this need to be very careful. Need to make sure the seals are all, the first seal, I haven't finished cleaning the housing yet, but is down past that porthole, that leak hole, otherwise then you're in trouble. So there's a bit of goop in there from when it's been water contaminated. So yeah, they've got a little bit of room there to move up and down, but not a lot. So that measure your depth to where your wear mark is, and then set your seal into position. Same with your outer seal, just measure it again to get it so you're not where the old wear mark was. Usually get a couple of rebuilds out of a set of fuel pump gears. This is one that's been used a couple of times. Looks like it's done 3 or 4 different rebuilds, or been used again a few times, and the grooves in there are quite deep. So usually you get the life of the engine. So when it's due for an engine rebuild the fuel pump. A lot of people don't do them when they do an in-chassis, but it's a good idea. Just it keeps everything up to scratch. All right, well I'll go and put these seals, we'll clean this housing up and put the seals in, and then we'll show you once it's all back together. Okay, so now we're ready. I've got the seals in, all ready to go. They've all pressed in. I've measured them up, got them in the right spot. Pretty happy with that. So we're all good to go to put our shafts in and our gears. Firstly, I usually put in the relief valve, which is just here. So a little bit of oil on the plunger, just to keep him lubricated before he gets any fuel in there. Slip him in the hole. Just push him in with your finger. He'll go in. Oop. Make sure you put this pin in. If you don't, the spring will cock eye in there and give you all sorts of trouble. It will jam the regulator or the relief valve. Make sure that you have the copper washer, which I should just dropped somewhere. It's rolled away on me. New one each time for here. So copper washer on. Also notice I've put some 567 Loctite thread sealant, not the yellow one, but the white one, the nice soft one, just to make sure it doesn't leak. As they get older and the threads wear, they do tend to sometimes leak. This is a bit of a mean feat with one hand. Usually you have 2. Anyway, we'll give it a go. There we go, we've got it started. So, screw that in. And I'll tension that up in a minute. It's got a tension of 25 foot-pound on that. So I always just put a little bit of oil just in that hole there where you can see the relief valve. Then don't put any oil in the hole here, not in the hole. Place a little bit around the outside, just a little bit. It'll run in if you're not careful. And if you get it in there, it actually hydraulic locks the gears and you won't be able to get the lid on the pump down tight, or you'll keep trying and you'll smash the top of the pump. So always oil on the shaft of the gear, just on the sides, just a little bit, because if you put oil down that hole, it will hydraulic lock, I promise you. So in with the new gear, nice and free, spins nicely, which is good. Bit of oil, everyone's happy. Same with the new shaft. You can't hydraulic lock this one, but just some oil on the shaft for the seals and the top for where it goes into the housing, and a little bit on the face where the gears are going to run. You'll feel it sort of hit the seal, then just push turn till it drops into the next gear. Bingo. So there is sealant to be applied to the housings. They are a machine surface, so they are designed to be mated together, and they also require, just to stop weepage, some sealant. I use, yet again, 515 plan sealant, just a thin smear all just around the outside edge, trying to keep it away from too close to the gears, just around the holes very closely and very finely. There's my cigarette bag. So I'll get some now. We'll just apply a little bit to the pump just to give you an idea. What we're trying to achieve. So as you can see, I put a bit of a dollop there, but I'll actually puddle it out and spread it round. Don't want it too thick at all. Actually want it thinly spread as we can. It won't lock the pump up if it gets in there, but it's not good mojo. This stuff doesn't go off till it has no air, so you've got a bit of time to work with it, which is good. It's a good product. I use it to put all my two strokes together and any other engine basically at the end of the day as well. It's good on gaskets. It's good in this application as well, so yeah, it works well. So we have a reasonably fine film, kept it away from the gears as best as we can with my big fat fingers. So he's ready now to accept the lid. So we'll make sure big hole onto the big gear, otherwise it's just not going to go on. Now that will then, has two dowels as well, so the dowels are fairly firm. Just press on the pump with your hand and it should drop down. Should pretty much close up, which it has. So now we need some bolts, which yet again were, these were not never seized, but because the pump hadn't been apart previously, they were all a bit oily and yucky, so we'll put them in. We should dig them out first. These are only 15 foot-pound, so they're only small. And there's our fuel pump gear from before that was covered in never seize. Well, it's a bit rusty, so we'll give him a bit of a blast and make him look pretty again. Just put some oil on the bolt. Most of the holes here go through, so there's no blind holes where the bolt can bottom out. There's a couple on this side. I think there's two here in the middle that bottom out that are blind holes, but they're fairly deep. If you don't go and try and change the fuel pump bolts that are in it, you'll be fine. If you don't go and try and buy stainless steel ones to make it pretty or something, you'll be right. Just if you do, put the same size. Don't try and reinvent the wheel. I've seen it done before. Reinvent the wheel and get yourself in a bit of strife sometimes. So now it's just a matter of putting all these bolts back in and then tensioning them to 15 foot-pound. So the process in which to do that is to start, just nip it all down, then start in a crisscross pattern. So I would start here, then I'd go with the here. Then I would come over to here and come over to there. And just keep working my way back and forth like that. Keep it nice and even. And at all times, just checking that the pump still rotates. Just in case something has gone wrong. You never know. So just be patient with it and gentle, and you'll get a good result. All right, so that's the fuel pump. I'll tension these up now, and I'll show you in a minute when I've got it all spinning freely. All done up, ready to go. So I'll sit him there in the vise. And little spanner. Away we go. I might just nip him up a bit in the vise, make it easier. Just be gentle doing it up in the vise. Show it some love. Yeah, there we go. Nice and easily spinning around. You'll feel the gears. They aren't perfectly smooth, but they sort of have a little bumpy feeling because of the shape of the gears. They're quite a coarse gear. But other than that, quite nice, beautiful. Feels beautiful. Happy with that. All right, so now that's ready to go on the blower. So I'll get the clean the fuel pump fork up, some wire buff these bolts here, get the elastic out of the threads, and so these bolts will go through onto this cover here. Now I've got to clean the elastic out of the holes. As you can see, there was a bit down the holes. Had a bit of trouble getting the fuel pump off. Actually, there was a fair bit of slaz there, but these holes, as you can see, go through. So we need to put a little bit of the Loctite white soft sealant on there again, and also these bolts in the gasket set you will receive, or a fuel pump overhaul kit, you'll get the copper washers that go on the bolts, help stop the oil coming out. So yeah, 567 is just there as a help to make sure it doesn't leak. Sometimes they leak, sometimes they don't. Sometimes people put them together and you get away with it. But just it's something that I've always done, was taught to do by my people that I did my apprenticeship with, just to prevent anything happening later on down the track. Nothing worse than having to go and pull a fuel pump off and it's hanging down in the bottom of the boat, or on the side, the truck's on the side of the highway. Make all the measures you can to make sure it's not going to leak or fall apart. So we'll put some wire buff these and a bit of white snot and we'll get it together. Okay, so it's Wednesday morning. I'm running behind schedule. Supposed to be meeting Stuart shortly. So I've got to finish getting this governor together. So I've machined this end, which is going to run against the fork. On the fork, I should say, the governor weights, which I've assembled this morning. Not even thinking what I was doing, should have videoed it for you guys, but I just was rushing a bit too much. So dressed all the faces up just nicely with a file and some emery cloth, just to make them look nice and neat, make sure there's no lumps or bumps or flat spots in them. Keep them nice and concentric, nice small curve on them. So I've machined the end of this. You can just see the little marks that are left there, a couple of little stains. So you can't machine this forever. A couple of thou is about the life of them. I've probably taken a thou off it at the most. It's very small marks. So yeah, they're not designed to be machined, but in what they do, the thou there you can adjust out on your with your governor gap when you're setting the spring up. So it will be gone. You won't notice it. It just won't affect the performance of the engine at all. We used to machine these when I was an apprentice consistently, machine each end until they were gone, but until deemed unserviceable by the boss. But I think some of his unserviceable was a bit further than I'd actually probably ever want to go. But they're good blokes. They taught me a lot, and I can't thank them enough for the knowledge they've given me. But anyway, so I'll get this on here. This now will slide down over the top. I'll just get some oil onto here. This was all seized. As I said yesterday, it was all frozen and couldn't move it up and down. It was, this was stuck. It was jammed down. The weights were jammed hard. I pulled this off. The weights were still jammed. So anyway, that's nice now. That's how it should be. It should just fall freely. Should be no resistance whatsoever. So in turn, this is the old, that is what they call the riser, considering it rises with the weights throwing out. This is the old riser bearing. You can see the pitting and the rust marks in it. It's knackered, and they do get wear marks from the rollers, and it do start to break up. You'll see the hard facing starting to lift in a couple of spots when you look across it there. that happens too, just with wear and tear. You know, a million kilometres in a truck, you'd be looking at, this would be just about worn out. So, you know, hours and miles equate. But so we have a new one of those somewhere here on the bench. So here we are in the packet, pretty nice new shiny one. Readily available through any of your aftermarket Detroit places. I use a mob in Brisbane called Diesel Engines and Spares. Great blokes. So I've just put some oil in there. Just going to oil these up now. Put some oil in there and get this sitting on the shaft. I'll just put a bit more oil on that. So there's the riser bearing. All right. So that just slides on and runs against the governor fork when you see it. Alright, so that's that. The governor shaft bearing in the end of the housing, it's just pretty well, it's just a really snug push-in fit with your fingers. All of these, some of these bearings you can't go to the bearing shop and buy. They are made specifically for this application, and if you get one that will fit from the bearing shop, make sure that it's rated for speed, it's rated to do the job that it's going to do, because if it doesn't, it will collapse. I've seen this before. People have bought bearings thinking they're doing the right thing, saving some bucks, and ended up with a set of governor weights and a whole lot of stuff flying out the side or smashing the governor housing to bits. Okay, so this is the little bolt that retains the, goes in the thread hole there, which retains the bearing onto here. So it's a bit of a snug fit. Just wiggle, get him started, and then there's a lock tab. So I suppose I usually I keep in stock governor repair kits. They're for a limiting speed governor, not a variable speed, but a lot of the parts are interchangeable, bearings and the bushes and the pins and the clips. Because no one makes a kit for a governor. DEIS in Brisbane, they make up kits of his own, with all the right parts. So he makes up his own kit and sells it, which is really handy for me and for most of the other guys that do two-stroke stuff. Or you buy the bits, you've got your Welsh plugs that you need to go in the V-series housings, the different bushes that for different governor weights, the bearings for the throttle shafts and different governor weights yet again. They're all here. There's all different pins as well that do different things in the governors. That's for the governor weights, but in this situation they're a much shorter pin, so you have to buy them individually. And there's all the thrust washers here. As you can see, there's all the thrust washers that go in between the weights. Circlips are all here for the shafts that go on the end of the little shafts for the governor weights. So they're all, it's quite a great little kit. Be good if Detroit's did one, but they don't. So yeah, and I suppose there's the O-rings for your governor lid, for your seals, special washers to put the crush on the O-ring to make sure it seals properly. So it's a pretty entailed kit. It's a few $100, don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of bits and pieces there, and you use 9/10 of it. There might be a couple of washers you don't use, or some different sort of bushes and bearings you might use one, not the other, but it pretty much covers everything. So we had to wash all the never-sees yet again off the bolts. So done that, and so I'll put this little lock. I'll get this onto here, get this set up, and then I'll be ready to head off and go and see Stuart down at Mount Coringai.
So, a couple of hours after Adrian finished putting that together, he turned up at the workshop at Mount Coringai, and, you know, the rest history. It went pretty well, and having now seen what Adrian did back in his workshop, I can understand why it started so well and ran so well. You know, doing these jobs perfectly is critical, and Adrian's got so much experience. As he said, you know, he's been doing these Detroit since he was 15, so he really knows them inside out. So once again, huge thanks to Adrian, not only for helping me get this motor running perfectly, but also for sharing a lot of his knowledge and experience. Adrian's business is 892 Trucking, so I've put some contact details in the description to the video. Not so you can bother him with questions, but just so if you do need a Detroit mechanic and you're somewhere kind of on the north side of Sydney, then I highly, highly recommend using him. All right, well, take care. I hope you had a great Christmas. It's now Boxing Day morning, so, I hope you all had a great day, had a great year. I'm now still pushing on with some engine mounts, finishing those up so we can get the Detroit dropped in, hopefully sometime before New Year's. Anyway, I'll keep you posted. All right, well, take care and I'll see you then. Bye.